I'm your host Namra Iqbal and welcome to the first episode of Out in the Open, a show where we discuss topics that are considered taboo in our society, especially amongst minority groups. Today's topic of discussion is a chronic illness that affects 1 in every 10 women. In other words, 10% of women all around the world are affected by this chronic illness. However, not many people are brave enough to talk about it out loud. Today's topic of discussion is none other than endometriosis. Now, before we speak to our lovely guests in the studio, we are going to show a little clip with important facts about endometriosis. Let's take a look. Today in the studio we have 2 incredible endo warriors with us. They are none other than Amila Begum and Heidi Salter. Welcome to the show, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you, Namra.
Before we start talking about endometriosis itself, please tell us a bit about yourselves. We'll start with Amila first.
Okay, so my name is Amila Begum. I'm by profession a business consultant, motivational speaker, so I do speak at events particularly targeted at women. You'll understand why in a moment. And I'm also a radio presenter on Unity FM, which is a local Birmingham radio, and I present the Women's Hour with Amila on a Friday at 7 o'clock, addressing lots of issues that affect women. And I'm also an ambassador for the charity Women with Endometriosis.
Fantastic. And how about you, Heidi?
As you know, my name's Heidi Salter. I currently work in-house legal counsel for an organisation called Housing 21, who are a not-for-profit charitable organisation who provide retirement housing and extra care for over 55s. I'm a trustee on the board for Waits, who provide holistic support and accommodation for women suffering from domestic abuse and violence. I'm also an ambassador for Women with Endometriosis, along with Amila. The charity was founded by Carla Cressy, and they campaign and raise awareness for women with endometriosis. Amila and I have attended Parliament at a roundtable meeting to start a task force for women with endometriosis. And I also admin a Facebook group of over 5,000 women across the world who are suffering with either endometriosis or other hormonal issues. And the group was founded by Bonnie Wong, and I admin that for her. And I'm also a regular on Amila's Women's Hour chat show at Unity FM. So
fantastic. Now, I knew that there was something wrong with me as soon as I started my periods at the age of 12. They were heavy flowing, excruciatingly painful, and they were always irregular. However, every time I went to my GP, I was told that, oh, it's normal, it happens to everyone, everyone has bad periods. It wasn't until December 2018, just after I turned 24, that I was finally diagnosed by a gynecologist telling me that I had endometriosis. Now, to go off with that, when did you realize that there might be something wrong? And when were you actually diagnosed with endometriosis afterwards?
Do you want to go first, Heidi?
Well, I was around 12, 13 years old when I realised there was something wrong. I would have excruciatingly painful periods, heavy periods, and I was on codeine and paracetamol from that age, whereas my sister, who was a year younger than me, didn't have any issues with her periods at all. So there was quite a contrast between the two of us. And I even collapsed one night when I was 18 because I didn't have any painkillers in my room, and I had to crawl to my mum and dad's room across a courtyard on my hands and knees, and just at 3 o'clock in the morning, like crying to wake my dad up for painkillers. I went undiagnosed for about over 20 years. I started seeing my GPs in the Midlands when I was 23. And I was diagnosed at the age of 36. I was seeing my GP with complaining regularly of excruciating pain, blackouts, bowel pain, abnormal lethargy, and I was prescribed mefenamic acid for 7 years, which is a type of muscle relaxant, and I was dismissed as having overreacting to the pain, and that it was normal for women to go through pain when they had their periods.
Like Heidi, mine probably I suffered for over 20 years, and I actually got my diagnosis at the age of 40, and that was following a misdiagnosis at a leading hospital. I don't want to do any name or shame, but yeah, so at a leading hospital they missed my diagnosis. I took the images from that surgery to another specialist consultant in Surrey, and he just looked at the images and said that's endometriosis. So July last year, to be specific, 18th of July, just over a year ago, is when I got diagnosed with endometriosis. I don't, and like yourself, Heidi, I think I just grit it and got on. I didn't notice the pain. It was there, and I just got on, and that was it. Just got on with it. And then over the last few years, I would say from about 2016, my health significantly started to decline, and that's when I was like, okay, this grit isn't working anymore, so I really need to go out there and push for a diagnosis and try to understand what's going on.
Yeah. Amila went through a terrible time. I mean, your pain was just ridiculous, wasn't
24/7 in pain for about, I would say, to the latter part, before having my hysterectomy for 18 months. So, yeah.
Exactly what I'm going to say to all the women and young girls that are watching this. I have very similar story to Amila when it comes to just gritting it on for when you're in school. To all of you who think that you might have endometriosis or any other menstrual health issues, be persistent with your GP. Take a friend with you if you're someone who's under the age of 18. Take a parent with you, and keep trying to get your GP to get you an appointment with a gynecologist. That's the most important part. And if you think that the gynecologist's opinion isn't correct and you still think there is something wrong with you, be persistent and try and get a second opinion. Unfortunately, getting a diagnosis for any sort of menstrual health issue or a lot of issues within women is very hard. It takes time, it takes a lot of persistence, a lot of nights where, you know, you feel like giving up, but don't give up, keep being persistent, and one day they will listen. So don't give up on it, and do get a diagnosis from a gynecologist or a specialist, because that's the only way you're going to find out exactly what's wrong. To move on from that, how does endometriosis sort of affect your day-to-day daily routine?
For me, if we look at endometriosis, it's where the lining of the womb is found.
Yes.
in other parts of the body, particularly in the tummy area. So when you start thinking that you've got these tissues that are on your ovaries, your fallopian tubes, your bladder, your bowel, in your pelvic area, the pelvic floor area, for some women in their diaphragm, and this is cyclically, these are affecting you.
Yeah.
There's excruciating pain there. I mean, I was taking morphine and it did nothing for my pain. I've had to have ambulance come out and take me just so that I can get to the hospital and have the pain administered at the hospital, killers administered at the hospital. The day-to-day life, being constantly in pain, it restricts your physical ability to do things, to move around, sitting down for long periods of time. I remember we went away for a weekend to Cornwall with my friends, and it was about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive. And after that drive, when I got to Cornwall, I started bleeding. And then I was in excruciating pain. There's fatigue that comes with it. There's hormonal imbalance. There's inflammation. So when you have the inflammation, just to imagine just such a tiny space that we have in our tummy area and the pelvic area, everything then is kind of like fighting with each other to find space. So that's the physiological affecting you day to day. The fatigue, making you tired. Then you have insomnia. So I would have nights where I'm like just crazy, watching the wall and the light and the changing of day from night turning into day, just literally watching that happening through the night, to days where I've got fatigue and I find myself sleeping for like 17 hours, 27 hours even. I've done a 27-hour sleep. And then when you have that consistently for so many years, you've got the mental, the psychological effect that it has on you. So in terms of how has it affected me, it's a significant impact on my physical ability and also on my psychological state of mind.
How about you, Heidi?
I was going to say that when I reached 32, by that point, I was suffering tremendously. I was having blackouts regularly every time of the month. Every time it was my time of the month, but not only then, throughout the month, I was developing pain through various times. I was getting migraines, back pain, hip pain, and my ovaries were just in tremendous pain, but not when I was having my period, just outside of that. So it even hurt to take a step or to sit down. The pain was that intense, and it got to the point where I was even walking with a limp on my left side because of the groin pain. So I would spend many a time in a room, darkened room, crying with migraines and horrendous pain. So my husband and I couldn't even just watch dinner and cook dinner and watch TV as we normally did. It had an impact on so many parts.
Yeah, and I think when just as you mentioned, when you're talking about like, you know, cook dinner and watch TV, like I was at a point where I could no longer do cleaning, and I had to actually get a cleaner to come once every 2 weeks or so to do the thorough cleaning, because I just couldn't do the cleaning. I'll do the cleaning and then I'm left in pain, and I'm like,
and
I can't live like that.
I couldn't go walking, and my husband and I used to go hiking and walking all the time, and I just couldn't even do that.
And I think the other thing as well is that because we're constantly talking about being in pain, so it affects your social life.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because you have to say, look,
you
I
feel
can't
like
come
a
out.
stuck record.
Yeah, I can't come out because I'm in pain.
So going straight from that, how did endometriosis affect your school life and now your current work life? And did you have to sort of change your career path in any way or form?
You go?
Yeah, so as I said to you earlier, it does affect. It did affect my school life tremendously. It affected my confidence because I was always worried about leaking onto my clothes from my heavy flow, or not being able to do sports at certain times, etc., and having to travel on a bus to and from school, and standing up. I was constantly worried all the time, so my confidence was very low, and I think that did have a knock-on effect on my social life and my work life later. And then later on in my career, I felt like I was constantly having to work harder to get ahead because of the time that I was taking off sick. Although I would only take absolutely crucial days off, but it's still there, and you can't really say to your boss, "I'm sorry, I can't come in today," or I'm not performing as well as I normally do because I've got a really bad period. And at that point, I wasn't diagnosed, so you don't get much sympathy when you say it's due to period pain. So.
Yeah, because women have period, get on with it.
Yeah. Exactly.
With myself, I think my formative early school years, I've just blocked it out and just got on.
Very similar to you then.
Got through, you have a period, you want to see the doctor, it's normal. Your parents, your family, not parents, my mother, my siblings around me, other women around me who are having, and young girls having period, they're just getting on with it, get on with it, what's the problem? And so I just kind of like rode through like that. When you talk about how it affected work, I'm a workaholic, and anybody who knows me knows that I'm a workaholic. And in my workplace, it started to affect me in that I wasn't able to perform to the standard that I would perform, and I started taking time off, where I'm the kind of person who never would take time off, work round the clock 7 days a week if I had to. And then when I started to say I'm not coming in because I'm not well, or I'm not going to turn up to this, or I have to reschedule this meeting, then it started to become like concerning. I was a trainee solicitor. I gave up the career path of becoming a solicitor when I got married 15 years ago. 3 years later I divorced. A few years after that I was given the opportunity to go back and get that back on track with becoming a solicitor. And then last year when I had my laparoscopy surgery and it went undiagnosed, but my health was still deteriorating, I had to give up that opportunity of completing my training contract. And had I been able to continue, I would have been on the roll of register for the solicitors this October. I would have qualified, and so it has significantly affected. But then on the flip side of it, I chose not to change my work as a business consultant because I was able to then choose my hours. If I wanted to drop work, I could, and I think that worked out for me to be able to accommodate my health. State of health, I guess.
Yeah. Okay, now the next few questions are a bit more personal. So if there's anything that I ask and you're just like kind of not comfortable talking about that, please just let me know and we can move on to the next one. The first question I have here is, what sort of effect has endometriosis had on your relationships with friends, families, your partners in your life? So whoever wants to go first.
So I think I'm very blessed to have had a very understanding and supportive family and friends, and well, the friends that stuck by me are the friends that are true friends, and my husband's been very, very supportive as well. So it was very difficult before I was diagnosed, I think I mentioned before, because if you're just complaining that you've got painful periods, it's very difficult for friends and family to understand why you're making more of a big deal about it than most people. So there is that attitude of just get on with it. But I was very fortunate. I did have blackouts, and I think it was then that my family and friends knew that there was something more serious going on. So
I think your husband has been very, very supportive, and I think, but having said that, there are stories where it's broken marital relationships.
I've heard so many women because they're unable to maybe have sex as often, or their partners just don't understand why their particular wife is going through so much.
I think for me, the relationship with my family was significantly affected because they just didn't understand endometriosis. And like you said at the start of the show, it's a taboo.
Yeah.
And, you know, we don't talk about periods. And I used to think it was like probably the fact that being, you know, Asian, being Muslim. But then when I started to become when I became an ambassador with women with endometriosis and hearing the stories of women from all over the globe, it wasn't a cultural or a Muslim woman thing. It's just we don't talk about periods. It's, you know, you brush it under the carpet and you get on with it. And as I was becoming physically weaker, I wasn't able to do certain things in terms of familial duties and responsibilities, shared responsibilities. And that had a huge effect because I was like, why can't you see? And then you got but you look perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
And when you are able to go out, it's like a note is made to say, what, you went out?
Yeah.
You know, you went away for a weekend. Yeah. So if you were that bad, you wouldn't be able to do these things. And I think that lack of understanding really affected it. And when I had my treatment, particularly, I know that you had the Prostat, which is the chemical menopause.
Yeah.
When I had the Zoladex, which is the chemical menopause, and that was in October last year that I had it for 3 months. And then prior to that, I had the Mirena coil, and that affects the hormones. So I had there was a hormone imbalance, and that really, really affected me. And there was a lack of understanding from family members who are very, very close to me that actually there's something that this person is going through that's making them act not like themselves, behave in a way that they wouldn't normally behave. And I felt kind of like, because of the lack of understanding, family relationships were affected and broken to an extent, which I'm working on building that back up.
Now, what I'm going to say next is, now, endometriosis does have an effect on a woman's fertility rate. And if you're someone like myself who has 3 types of endometriosis, adenomyosis and PCOS, my fertility rate is a lot lower than if you just have one condition. And at a certain point, your gynecologist does suggest that you look into treatments, whether it's an IVF or other fertility treatments, medications. In my case, my gynecologist has even said to possibly think about adoption and, you know, other forms of having children. And that's something that women with menstrual health issues do have to consider. Now, taking that on, I know this is quite personal, but how did you feel when you were first told by a doctor that you're going to have difficulties having kids? I'm not going to go on to the point that you might never be able to have kids, but difficulties, because there's always a possibility with a miracle that might happen. But
well, this particular question is very close to my heart, and as I say, it took my GP 13 years to even get me diagnosed, and that was just purely by accident. I was only sent to go and have a bowel scan because I was having blackouts from the bowel scan. I'd been complaining to my GP that my husband and I had been trying for like 7 years to have children. We'd never used contraception, and he just said, you know, you need to have sex more. And there wasn't any. So it was only when I went to go and have my bowel scan that I was accidentally diagnosed. Well, it led to my accidental diagnosis of endometriosis. But by this point, I was 36. So my gynecologist diagnosed me, and he said, after the laparoscopy that I'd had, he said, you've got stage 4 endometriosis with frozen pelvis, and which is when you've got adhesions, adenomyosis. So I had all of those things at once, and he said it's going to be very unlikely that you're going to have children. He said if you had have been diagnosed sooner at stage 1, 2 or 3 in my 20s or 30s when I'd been seeing my GP, he said you would have been more likely to conceive naturally. But the only way was for me to have IVF. So I went and had a round of IVF, and they managed to get some eggs and implant them, but it wasn't successful because of the endometriosis. Even makes IVF quite unlikely. So I broke down in tears. I was devastated. They did offer me another round of IVF, but the hormonal side of it is it's really bad for your body. So I had to make my peace with the fact that I couldn't have children, and if I had have been diagnosed sooner, then I would have had a chance to have children, but obviously that wasn't the case. So it's been a very hard pill to swallow.
And I think for yourself, before I come into my answer, I think that's what makes you so passionate about the work that you're doing, to reach, not raise awareness so much, but I think to reach women who are being diagnosed or suspected of having endometriosis, to get in there with them early.
Thank you. Yeah, so if there's anything that I can do to help women who are going through a similar situation, or try and raise awareness, or as you said before, get them to constantly keep pushing with their GPs, then that's, even if I can help one woman, that will be something.
I think for me, my story is very different. After I got, as I mentioned earlier, after I got divorced 13 years ago or so, I really wanted to have children. I've always wanted to have 2 boys and a girl. I've actually written a book, co-authored a book, which is called Courage is My Crown, which is going to be launching on the 29th of July, and I share my story in there. But then after I got divorced, I found I was really bad initially to begin with about wanting to have children. I thought, right, I've either got to focus on my career and re-establishing what I gave up, or I have to look to go down that and get married again and have children. I did look to get married again. It wasn't working out. I thought, right, I've wasted 3 years, nothing's happening. I need to go onto the career and fix that back up. So I think I'm quite a spiritual person, and I found contentment within me, and it was okay. I was okay with not wanting to have children. So when I found out that I had endometriosis, it was really easy for me to make the decision of wanting a hysterectomy, and for me that was made the treatment options for me quicker. And I think, getting diagnosed at the age of 40, I didn't want to suffer any more years with endometriosis. But having said that, it's still to not know that you can't be a mother, you just can't explain that feeling.
It's the thing about having a choice of not having kids, and then having that sort of choice sort of taken away, and it's like, actually, because of a medical condition, it's difficult or near impossible for some people to not be able to have children. And I think a lot of people, women as well, that don't understand what's going, what that impact has, and especially with South Asian women, kids, getting married and having kids is such a huge priority that we need to, come on, it's 2019 now, we need to change the way we think about how a woman should live their life.
And I think,
come on, guys.
like with me, with Heidi and myself, we're both quite spiritual, and we believe that what is meant to be is what will be, and
everything happens for a reason.
Okay. Before we go on to some of our questions from our audience, one last question, and it kind of leads in to 2 questions in one, sort of. Were there any support groups, organizations, or online forums that were helpful for you after you had been diagnosed with endometriosis? So to help with moral support, or to help you trying to find the right treatment? And then to go straight in after that, we know that both of you are ambassadors of women with endometriosis. So how did that start? And what do you guys actually do with that organization?
Okay, so with myself, I have to say this, and I'm gonna say this with from the bottom of my heart. that Heidi has actually been my biggest support, because she was there from when I started suspecting that I had endometriosis. Heidi came on my radio show as a guest, and then since then, that was in November 2017 we first spoke. She was on my show in January 2018, and since then we've grown to become really, really good friends. And I was then introduced that there's Facebook groups. So Women with Endometriosis Charity is one of them. Endo Revisited is one of them as well. So there are support groups out there, and social media does have a good purpose to it. And I came to learn about Women with Endometriosis Charity through the radio show, because another guest who came on with Heidi, Erin, she mentioned the charity. The founder of the charity, Carla Cressy, who used to be a glamorous model, got affected by the disease and set this charity up in May last year. And so we started to talk on the phone, and I then got involved, and we organised an awareness dinner which took place in November last year. We had leading specialists speak at the event, about 130 guests. Nothing of that kind has happened in the UK
and international
before.
doctors. We had doctors coming over from the US.
Yeah, the world-renowned Professor Kamran Najat came. And so my involvement now with Women with Endometriosis Charity is kind of like on a strategic level, because that's where my forte is as a business consultant. So kind of like giving that direction. And like Heidi mentioned earlier, we've been to Parliament.
Yeah.
And sat around a roundtable discussion with ministers who have an interest in health, trying to raise that awareness. And I do a lot of work as an ambassador, kind of like on a grassroots level as well, because I do a lot of community work and trying to talk more about endometriosis. So any opportunity I get, I'll talk about it.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So I'm pretty much the same as Amila, but when I was first diagnosed, there wasn't much support out there. So it was a few years ago now. So I didn't really have that, so I had to research myself, and I relied on discussions that I had with doctors and specialists and gathered information the hard way, really. There is a lot more now, but there wasn't at the time. And then we joined Women with Endometriosis with Carla Cressy, as Amina said, and they've been just tremendous at raising awareness, and the charity is committed to the promotion and protection of young women going through the disease and trying to get
So what the charity
diagnosis,
does focuses on making sure that these young women, these young girls and these women are supported, whether they're suspected of having endometriosis or whether they do have endometriosis, making sure they know about the things like the NICE guidelines, which is the National Institute for Clinical Excellence. There is a NICE guidelines on endometriosis, including guidelines for young girls under the age of 18, how they can get diagnosed, because we have directed so many women to their GP with that NICE guidelines. And also, you mentioned earlier on, go and see a gynecologist, but there are specialist endometriosis gynecologists which come under the British Society for Gynecological Endoscopy, where you can get a list. And so it's trying to make sure, as ambassadors, as a charity, that we are getting the women and advocating for them, directing to the right place to get the right diagnosis and treatment.
Great. Before we wrap up the show, we've got a little bowl here which has some questions from our audience, which is Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Twitter. Since we're running very short on time, how about we get you two to pick one question each, and then we can just answer it together. So how about Heidi, you can pick one.
And whilst you just mentioned all the social media, Women with Endometriosis Charity, they've got a Facebook page.
It's a lovely Facebook page, by the way, guys.
Instagram. And you can also find both of us on Facebook and Instagram, and we are there for you around the clock. I've even attended hospital appointments.
Yes,
so
too,
with ladies. So
Heidi, do you want to go first?
Yeah, so the question I've got is, does endometriosis affect your sex life and sex drive, and how do you deal with it? So yes, it can do. For some, I mean, it varies for women from woman to woman. So there might be some ladies who don't have any problems with their sex life, and then some people who have it can cause very painful sex, apparently. I haven't had that, but I did have painful orgasms, but only later on when I got to stage 4, because of the frozen pelvis, it kind of pulls on the muscles. there are ways of dealing with it. So there are, the doctors can put you on something called Prostap or Zoladex, but it's a very short period, 6 months to 9 months drug, which puts you into chemical menopause. So it stops the hormones, and it's supposed to help relieve pain. It doesn't necessarily work for everyone. There's something called the Mirena coil, but I know some ladies have had trouble with that. So there are things that you can do, but and also just speaking to your partner, you know, and educating them about what the disease is, and just asking them to perhaps find alternative ways, or be a bit more gentle, or
yeah, I mean, it's having that open dialogue, isn't
Yeah.
it? Like, I can't comment on that question particularly, but this is going by conversations that I've had with other women. And again, I'm going to come back to, if you can go on the Women with Endometriosis Facebook page, and once you're on the page and you're being accepted, which I'm an admin for, so I'm quite cool when it comes to approving requests.
I'm also part of that.
And then you just type in the word sex or intercourse or painful sex, and there's lots of chats that have already happened. You might be too shy to want to ask the question, but you'll find, like, historically, there's been lots of questions on it. You can read those in the comments and get an idea and advice for what's worked with certain women, what hasn't worked, and maybe even contribute to the conversation, so that it's there for that support as well if they want it. Okay, so my question is, how does endometriosis affect a person's mental health? I would say significantly, and I touched on it earlier. I myself had to get counselling, and anybody who knows me as a very strong-headed woman, and you know, to go and say, like, I need help because this is really affecting me was a big step for me. And the reason why I had to get counselling is because I was constantly in pain. I wanted to do things that I couldn't do. And so my mind was over there, but my physical body was over here. And I was exhausted, trying to constantly play catch up. The other thing that affected my mental health is that why aren't the people around me who are supposed to love me and care for me and be there for me, why aren't they understanding? Why can't they see it's such an invisible disease? And it's that it starts to affect you in your head, because then you start thinking, well, actually, is there anything wrong with me?
Yeah.
And you know, the number of misdiagnosis cases, and I'm a misdiagnosis case, you start thinking, well, and then when doctors are saying to you, it's normal, there's nothing wrong with you, and people around you saying, well, hold on, your doctor said there's nothing wrong with you. So you're constantly, it's this fight, and then the hormone imbalance will will have an impact on your mental health.
It does. But I would also add to that and say it varies from woman to woman.
Yeah.
Once
Yes,
again,
it does,
it didn't impact my mental health that much until I got to the point of IVF and not being able to have children, and then I was quite emotional about that, and that's when my hormones started kicking in, and then I had a total hysterectomy and my ovaries removed 18 months ago. So I'm feeling a lot better physically. I don't have the endometriosis pain, etc. now, but that also comes with its own issues. And as much as I thought endometriosis was a nightmare, you have no idea how much surgical menopause is something entirely different. And I don't know which one I'd rather choose, but they both present their own issues. So
I think also it's important to note, this is really, really important, that there are women with endometriosis who have committed suicide because they could not cope with it anymore. And what I would say to people who are listening is that if you do know somebody who's got endometriosis, please reach out to them. Even the strongest of women need a hand to hold. And if you are suffering from endometriosis and you feel your mental health is being affected, you must seek medical advice. Go and speak to your GP. There are lots of counselling services out there. Women with endometriosis have partnered with the Samaritans. You're not on your own. Honestly, when you start looking around you, there's a whole community of us. And
it's not a death sentence. I mean, it's painful and it can be excruciating, and it can almost destroy your life, but it's not a death sentence. So many, just to clear up any confusion, you know, you can't die from endometriosis. You know, there may be some complications which you need to monitor as it affects other organs, but from endometriosis itself, take some hope and
Yeah.
encouragement from that.
Okay, so even though it is the first episode, we did go a bit over, but that's all right. That's it for today, folks. I would like to thank Amila Begum and Heidi Salter for coming in to the studio. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us, Namra.
Yes.
To all the people that are watching this show, thank you so much for tuning in, and I really hope that you enjoyed watching this show and you got more informed. And to anyone that is also suffering from endometriosis, I hope this show helped you a bit into realizing that you're not alone. We will be coming back with the next episode where we'll be talking about another taboo topic with new set of guests. Until then, stay safe and always stay informed.